The photographer's flash powder went off at the precise moment Louisa stepped on the hem of her own gown, and the resulting photograph, she would learn later, showed her catching herself on the arm of a prince. She had not known it was a prince's arm. That was the precise and mortifying truth of it. She had known it was an arm, solid, present, belonging to someone who did not stagger when she hit him, and she had gripped it with both hands like a woman who had made her peace with public humiliation and simply wanted to complete the transaction efficiently. The flash had already fired. The damage was already done. She straightened, released the arm, looked up. He was watching her with an expression she could not immediately classify, not amusement, not irritation, not the particular species of polished blankness that the very well-born deployed when confronted with something inconvenient. Something else. Something attentive. "The stone," he said quietly. "There is a raised edge on the third step from the south door. I have watched 11 people catch themselves on it this morning." She became aware, in stages, of the following: the nave of St. Paul's Cathedral, full of black-clad mourners observing the memorial for a general she had never met, the rustle of 200 people pretending not to have witnessed what had just occurred, Lady Ashmore's order of service card, which Louisa had apparently dropped, and the man whose arm she had released, who was wearing a uniform she recognized, not from social familiarity, because she had no social familiarity with anything in this room, but from photographs. She curtsied, eyes down, the way she had practiced in the mirror of her rented room in Marylebone for 3 consecutive mornings. Heart loud. Almost. "Your Royal Highness," she said. Her voice was level. She was distantly proud of this. "You have dropped your order of service," he said. He did not retrieve it for her. He simply noted it, as one might note a change in weather, and turned his attention briefly toward the photographer who was reloading his equipment with the focused energy of a man who had captured something useful. What happened next was quiet. So quiet that Louisa, who had taken 2 steps toward the dropped card and was trying to retrieve it without bending in a manner that would attract further attention, nearly missed it. Prince Frederick turned his head very slightly toward the photographer. Said something she could not hear. The photographer looked up. Something passed between them, not a threat, not a command, something more efficient than either, and the photographer set his equipment down on its tripod and did not raise it again. She had her order of service card. She stood. She did not look at the prince. The service began. She spent the next 40 minutes folding and unfolding the card in her gloved hands. The text of it, a psalm, a general's honors, a regimental crest at the top, remained entirely unread. She folded it in half along its spine. Then, into quarters. Then, back to half. The cardstock was good quality, it held its creases without complaint. She counted the pew ends visible from where she stood, 14, running toward the crossing. She did not look to her left, where the prince stood at a distance that was not close and not far and, precisely, deliberately calibrated. She was certain this was the last day of her position. Lady Ashmore's companion, caught on camera, hands on a royal person, in a cathedral, during a state memorial. The story assembled itself with horrible efficiency. She thought of her father's study in Lincolnshire, the particular smell of it, cold stone and pipe tobacco and the collected works of someone improving. She had not been back in 4 years. She had not been back because there was no position for her there, no governess needed, no companion wanted, nothing for a clergyman's daughter who had been educated beyond her usefulness and not quite far enough beyond her station to make it interesting. She had learned early that quality of attention had a price. The service concluded. The great doors opened onto November fog. She followed the household out in the correct order, at the correct distance, looking at nothing. The photograph was published the following morning in 2 papers. She bought both. In neither of them was she present. Prince Frederick stood in the nave of St. Paul's, in full uniform, looking toward the south door at something the camera could not find. Alone. Composed. Looking at nothing. Or nothing visible. She stood in her room in the household quarters holding both papers and understanding, in a way that had no protocol and no comfortable shape, that he had done that on purpose. She folded the papers. Set them in the grate. went down to attend Lady Ashmore's breakfast. She did not mention it. Neither did anyone else. Lord Hartwell arrived at the Countess's apartments at 8:30, which meant something had already gone wrong. He was a spare man, Lord Hartwell, spare in the way that expensive machinery is spare, nothing present that is not load-bearing. He had the kind of courtesy that required no warmth to sustain itself, it ran on precision alone, and had been running for 30 years in the service of the Crown without apparent friction. He sat in the chair Lady Ashmore indicated, declined tea with a movement of his hand that was so minimal it barely qualified as a refusal, and looked at Louisa. "His Royal Highness," he said, "has inquired after the name of the Countess's companion." Lady Ashmore, who was 73 and had survived 2 husbands, one minor scandal involving a foreign diplomat, and the entire reign of Victoria without losing either her composure or her card-playing instincts, did not look at Louisa. She looked at Hartwell. "Has he?" she said. "The inquiry was made this morning." Hartwell's hands were folded in his lap. "I thought it prudent to inform you directly." This was, Louisa understood, the warning. It had been delivered with exquisite courtesy, in a comfortable chair, over an implicit offer of tea. It was no less a warning for any of that. "Miss Vane," Hartwell said, turning to her with the same economical precision he turned everything, "I trust you found the memorial service appropriately conducted." "Yes, my lord." "Good." He stood. "Lady Ashmore." A small bow. Then, he was gone, and the room felt both larger and more complicated than it had before he entered. Lady Ashmore picked up her teacup. "Well," she said, with the tone of a woman who has seen this particular species of courtly maneuver deployed before and found it mildly tedious. "Forewarned." Louisa spent the morning at her tasks, correspondence, an appointment confirmed, a shawl located, a letter to Lady Ashmore's daughter in Edinburgh drafted and redrafted until it contained no opinions of Louisa's own. She had a system for this. The system required a kind of deliberate self-erasure she had become quite good at. She erased herself now, officially, through the morning's work, and did not think about Lord Hartwell, or the photographs that had not contained her, or the precise weight of a man's arm under her hands in the nave of St. Paul's. The court luncheon was at 1 o'clock. She attended in her capacity as the Countess's shadow, present, useful, effectively invisible. This was her preferred mode of operation and she was skilled at it. She found her unmarked territory at the edge of the room, assessed the exits, 3, 2 serviceable, and prepared to be unnoticed for 90 minutes. He came in with 6 other people and the room rearranged itself the way rooms do. She had witnessed this phenomenon before, in other great houses, around other significant persons, the unconscious orientation, every body in the space adjusting its angle by some small degree toward the gravitational center without any individual deciding to do so. She had always watched it from outside it. She watched it now. She did not orient toward him. He did not look at her. Not for the first 20 minutes of the luncheon, during which she found her bearings, ate what was placed before her, and spoke when spoken to by the elderly baronet to her right who was interested in discussing drainage improvements in the East Midlands. The baronet's drainage improvements were, she found, genuinely interesting. She knew about drainage in the East Midlands. She had grown up 6 miles from a scheme that had transformed 3 parishes. The baronet was delighted. She did not look at the prince. Once, she did. It was the once that was exact. He was not looking at her directly. He was turned in profile, speaking to a woman on his left, and his attention was entirely appropriately placed. But the angle of his head was fractionally wrong for the direction of his conversation, and she had been reading rooms long enough to understand what a fractionally wrong angle meant. She looked away. Counted the diamonds in the tablecloth to the centerpiece. 37. The baronet said something about the fens. She responded with appropriate intelligence. There was no assigned place for her at the table's end. She had found her seat by following a footman who should not, strictly, have known which chair to indicate. He had known her name. Not Lady Ashmore's companion, not the woman in grey, her name. "Miss Vane, this way if you please." She ate the second course. She discussed the fens. She was, she reminded herself, invisible. The luncheon ended. She gathered Lady Ashmore's things, a small bag, a pair of reading spectacles left under the table's edge, and prepared to follow the Countess out of the room. She was 2 steps behind the older woman when she became aware of a presence passing behind her chair. Not stopping. Not speaking. Something set down on the tablecloth beside her plate with the soft, deliberate precision of a thing placed rather than dropped. She did not turn. She waited until the presence had passed. She could hear it, or felt she could, though she could not have said what she heard, and then she looked down. Her order of service card from St. Paul's. Still folded into quarters, with the crease marks she had made. Sitting on the tablecloth beside her abandoned water glass. He kept walking. She did not watch him go. She stood there for a moment. The room was emptying. The baronet had been absorbed by someone else near the door. Lady Ashmore was already in conversation with a woman in a green coat 6 feet away. The cards sat on the tablecloth. 42 diamonds to the centerpiece. She had miscounted earlier. She had been at 37 when she should have been at 42. She did not touch the card for 3 full minutes. Then, she picked it up. Put it in her coat pocket. Told herself it was simply tidying. She believed this for approximately the length of time it took her to cross the room. She stopped believing it at the door. The conservatory at Marlborough House was not, strictly speaking, open to the household staff at 7 in the morning, which was precisely why Louisa had been going there for 3 weeks. It was a practical calculation. The family did not rise until 9. The household staff had completed their first round of duties by 6:30 and would not begin their second until 8. The conservatory, in the narrow window between these two certainties, was empty, warm, glass-walled, smelling of damp soil and forced narcissus and the particular green smell of things growing under instruction, and entirely, blessedly, hers. She had her book. She had 35 minutes. She had a chair near the back that caught the early light through the east-facing panes and was invisible from the door. She was on page 40 of a history of the Flemish wool trade she had found in Lady Ashmore's library and had no particular desire to finish, but was reading anyway because concentration was a discipline and disciplines were maintained or they were lost. The door opened at 12 minutes past 7. She looked up. He had a book too. This she noted first, because it was the detail that did not fit, not his presence, which was surprising enough, but the book, which was dog-eared at the spine in the way of a book genuinely read rather than carried. He wore no uniform. A coat, dark, the kind that suggested he had dressed without assistance. He looked at her with the same expression she remembered from St. Paul's, attentive, unperformed, and then looked at the chair on the opposite side of the small table where her tea had gone cold. "I will not be here long," he said. It was neither apology nor explanation. It was information. "Neither will I," she said. He sat. Opened his book. She looked at hers. The Wool Trade in Ghent, 1320. She read the same sentence 3 times. Somewhere in the house, in a room she could not locate, music was playing. A piano, imprecisely, not a performance, something practiced and paused and tried again. A melody she almost knew. "The light is better here in the morning," she said, which was not what she had intended to say. She had intended to say nothing. "Yes," he said. He did not look up from his book. The south windows on the upper floors face a wall. "You lose 40 minutes of useful light." "I grew up in a rectory with north-facing windows," she said. "I developed strong opinions about light early." He looked up at that. Not with amusement, with the quality of attention she had no proper word for, the kind that felt like being measured not for inadequacy but for the specific shape of what she actually was. "Lincolnshire," he said. She had not told him she was from Lincolnshire. She had told no one at court she was from Lincolnshire. It was not the sort of information that arose. He had remembered the name of her village. He had simply remembered it. "Yes," she said. "The Fens, or the Wolds?" "The Wolds. My father's parishes was in the limestone belt. 300 souls and a Norman font and a field that flooded every February regardless of what anyone did about it. Was, he said. Not a question. He had heard the tense. He retired last year. The living went to a younger man. She looked at her book. The wool trade continued in Ghent, indifferent. It was the correct decision. She did not elaborate. He did not ask her to. The piano somewhere above them paused. Tried the same phrase again. She concentrated on it, let it fill the space where elaboration would have been her father's retreating footsteps, the particular diminishment of a man whose purpose had been given to someone else, the rectory sold to the younger man's family, and Louisa at 27 with 4 years of invisible service behind her and nowhere that was precisely home. The light through leaded glass, Frederick said, is different from plate glass. There is a quality to it. Older. Interrupted, she said. It arrives in pieces rather than sheets. He considered this. Yes. A pause. That is the better word for it. She looked up. He was looking at the east-facing panes, where the early light was coming through in exactly the manner she had described, fractured, gentle, arriving in sections. His profile against it was not remarkable except that it was, entirely, and she filed this observation in the same locked room where she had filed the order of service card and the chair indicated by the footman who knew her name, and turned back to the Flemish wool trade. The music, she said. Do you know what it is? He listened. The phrase above them attempted itself again, stopped, began once more. No, he said. It has been going since Tuesday. It sounds like something I should know. It sounds, he said, like something no one knows. I believe it may be original. She almost smiled. She caught it before it became fully public. He was watching the panes of glass and not looking at her, which meant she could almost smile if she was discreet about it, and she was always discreet. I disagree, she said. He looked up at her. It is not original. The interval in the third bar, the jump from the fifth to the flat seventh, I have heard that before. It is borrowed from something. It is the resolution that is original. Whoever is playing is trying to find an ending that fits something they did not write. He was quiet for a moment. Completely quiet. A stillness that had a specific quality, not the emptiness of nothing happening, but the fullness of something being absorbed. Then, he laughed. Not a court laugh. Not the performance she had seen deployed in public, the brief, appropriate expression of amusement, correctly calibrated for the room and the audience. This was a different thing entirely. Shorter, lower, genuinely surprised, and gone almost before she registered it. She understood something in her chest before she understood it in her mind. She had just seen the actual man. The one who existed before the uniform went on. She looked at her book. The wool trade in Ghent made no new progress. The music upstairs paused. Resumed. Paused. The flat seventh, he said, after a moment. Yes. I would not have heard that. It is the sort of thing you notice, she said carefully, when you have spent a great deal of time being quiet in rooms where other people are not. She had not intended to say that either. He did not pursue it. He did not press. He looked at his book and she looked at hers and the light came through the glass in pieces and the piano upstairs tried its unfinished ending one more time. At 8:20 she closed her book and stood. He did not stand, or rather, he began to and she made a brief motion with her hand that was not quite a gesture and he settled. She did not want the ceremony of it. She wanted to leave intact. She was at the door before she realized she had left her book on the bench. She looked at it. The distance back to the bench was 8 steps. He was sitting 2 feet from the book. He was not looking at her. He had the courtesy, or the intelligence, to be looking at the east-facing glass. She left the book where it was. She did not go back for it. She spent the walk back to Lady Ashmore's apartments identifying this behavior for exactly what it was, not carelessness, not an oversight, and finding that identification produced no useful corrective action whatsoever. She was, she concluded, in significant trouble. She attended to Lady Ashmore's morning correspondence with complete professional attention and did not think about a man who laughed like he'd forgotten how, or light arriving in pieces through old glass, or the specific sound of a piano 2 floors above searching for an ending it had not yet earned. She was almost successful. The letter was from her father, which meant it had been opened before it reached her. She recognized the seal, replaced, inexpertly, the wax a slightly different shade from the original. Someone in the household post room. Or perhaps earlier than that. She did not know the mechanics of how correspondence was managed at this level of the court and found, reading the letter over her cold morning tea, that she did not particularly want to learn. Her father wrote about the frost in Lincolnshire. About the new vicar's wife, who had opinions about the garden. About a volume of sermons he was preparing that would perhaps be of interest to no one but himself. He wrote with the careful cheerfulness of a man who had learned to occupy a small life without complaint, and, reading it, Louisa felt the familiar compression in her chest, not grief precisely, more the feeling of a room she had grown too large for and could no longer fit inside without bending. She folded the letter. Put it in her desk drawer. At 10 o'clock, Lord Hartwell sent a note requesting a brief meeting at her convenience, a phrasing so courteous as to be entirely without genuine optionality. He came at 11. He sat. He declined tea. There is to be a house party, he said. At Cavendish Hall. The 3rd week of November. His Royal Highness will be attending in the company of the household. She waited. Lady Eugenia Cavendish, Hartwell continued, with the tone of a man reading from a document that did not require his personal engagement with its contents, is a young woman of considerable merit. Her family's connections with the crown date to the previous reign. The arrangements are a small pause, barely a breath, concluded. The room was very quiet. Outside, November was doing what November did, pressing against the windows in gray increments, draining the light by degrees. I see, Louisa said. I thought it appropriate to inform you directly, Hartwell said. As I did previously. He looked at her with his economical courtesy, and she understood that this was not cruelty. Hartwell was incapable of cruelty, in the way that an accountant's ledger is incapable of cruelty, it simply recorded what was. You have conducted yourself with considerable discretion, Miss Vane. That has been noted. He laughed. She sat at her desk for a long time. Then, she took out a sheet of paper and began to write. Dear Lady Ashmore, it is with the deepest gratitude for your kindness these past months that I write to request. She stopped. Read what she had written. To request, she put the pen down. Walked to the window. The courtyard below was grey and empty, the cobblestones slicked with recent rain, a single groom crossing with his collar turned up against the cold. An ordinary Tuesday. An ordinary November. The kind of Tuesday that would exist whether she was in London or Lincolnshire, whether she was in this room or a colder and smaller one, whether she had ever come to court at all. He should not have to choose. That was the clear shape of it, when she let herself look at it directly. He should not have to weigh a clergyman's daughter against the machinery of a dynasty, against Hartwell's ledgers, against arrangements that were already concluded. He should not have to carry that weight because she had stumbled on a step in St. Paul's and gripped an arm that happened to be royal. She had made her decision, she realized, before she sat down to write. The letter was not a decision. The letter was documentation. She picked up the pen. She did not go to the conservatory the next morning. Nor the morning after. She told herself this was the cleaner way. The kinder surgery, applied before attachment, became something larger and more costly to remove. She had her system. The system required a kind of deliberate self-erasure she was very good at. She applied it now with the efficiency of a woman who has had considerable practice. On the 3rd morning she went to retrieve a book she had left behind, a specific book, The Flemish Wool Trade, which she had been reading before she was interrupted and which she would like, thank you, to finish. She opened the conservatory door. He was sitting on the bench. Her book on the table beside him, unopened, where she had left it. His coat on. No book of his own. The light through the east-facing panes was doing what it always did, arriving in pieces, illuminating nothing in particular. He did not stand.
He did not say good morning. He said nothing. She looked at him. He had been there for some time. There was a quality to his stillness that was not the stillness of a man who had just arrived, something more settled than that, something that had been still for long enough to become part of the room. He looked at her with the expression she had no word for, the attentive, unperformed one, and did not speak. She walked to the bench. Picked up her book. The unfinished letter was in her coat pocket. She was aware of its weight with the whole left side of her body. She looked up at the glass roof. 31 panes. She had counted them before, weeks ago, in a different season of uncertainty. They were still 31. She did not sit. She did not leave. The piano upstairs was silent. The house around them was beginning its morning in small audible increments, footsteps somewhere, a door, the distant percussion of the kitchen. November outside, ordinary and gray and indifferent. She stood in the conservatory with her book and her letter and 31 panes of glass above her and did not move. Neither did he. She was not ready, she found, to complete the documentation. Not quite yet. She stayed until Lady Ashmore's bell rang at 8, and then she went. The house party at Cavendish was 3 days away when Frederick asked her, in the conservatory, at 7 in the morning, whether she intended to be a coward. He did not say it unkindly. He said it the way he said most things, precisely, without decoration, as though he had considered the word and found it the most accurate available and saw no reason to dress it differently. She had been standing at the east-facing panes, not sitting, watching the light come through. She had not brought her book. She was not sure, this morning, why she had come at all, only that not coming had become increasingly difficult to sustain, like holding a position under pressure that was not violent but was entirely relentless. She turned from the glass. "I beg your pardon?" "You have written a letter," he said. He was on the bench. He had his own book, closed on his knee. "You have not sent it." She was quiet for a moment. "You cannot know that." "Hartwell knows everything that is sent from this household," he said. "And I know Hartwell." A pause. "He would have told me if you had sent it." With considerable satisfaction. The piano upstairs. There it was, the familiar phrase, the familiar jump, the familiar search for the ending. She had been listening to it for weeks and still could not place it. "It is the correct decision," she said. The same words she had used about her father's retirement. She heard the echo of them. For whom? She looked at him. He was watching her with an expression that was new, not the attentive, assessing quality she had catalogued, but something quieter and more direct, the expression of a man who has decided to say a thing and has calculated the cost and is paying it without complaint. "I asked you a question," he said. "Whether you intend to be a coward." "That is not a kind question." "No," he said. "It is not." He opened his book. Closed it again. Set it on the table beside him. "Hartwell manages things. He is very good at it. He managed the Cavendish arrangement with efficiency and, without consulting me, which is a detail I intend to address separately." He said this with a flatness that contained, she thought, a very large amount of something she was not going to name. "He will also manage your departure, if you permit it, with equal efficiency. He will make it neat. He will make it so that you simply are not here one day, and then it will be as though the step at St. Paul's had a different outcome and none of the rest of it occurred." She did not say anything. "I am not asking you to stay for me," he said. He was very clear on this point, looking at her without evasion. "I am asking whether you have decided your own worth, or whether you are allowing Hartwell to decide it for you." The piano upstairs tried the phrase again. The familiar jump. The unresolved ending. She thought about her father's letter. The careful cheerfulness of it. The compressed life. She thought about 4 years of rooms entered sideways, of speech measured in fractions, of being useful in the way furniture is useful, present, necessary, unremarkable. She thought about 31 panes of glass and the way light arrived in pieces and the specific laugh of a man who had forgotten how, briefly, and then remembered.
She was quiet for long enough that a door closed somewhere in the house. A clock somewhere marked the quarter hour. "I found the piece of music," she said. He went still. 3 weeks ago. I looked it up. She kept her voice level. It was the easiest discipline she had, and she leaned on it now. "It is a theme from a Schubert impromptu. The housemaid is playing the right-hand melody and improvising the left. She has been trying to find the accompaniment by ear since October." He was looking at her. "I have been waiting," she said, "for the appropriate moment to tell you." It did not arise. A pause that had a very particular shape. "Or," she said, "I was saving it." The room was quiet. The clock finished its quarter. Somewhere 2 floors above, the housemaid, having apparently decided this was the morning for it, played the phrase once more, and this time the left hand found something new, something that fit, something she had apparently worked out between yesterday and today, and the resolution arrived with the simple satisfaction of a thing that had been true all along, waiting. He said, after a moment, "You looked it up?" "Yes." 3 weeks ago. "Yes." The east-facing light came through the glass in its usual pieces. She was standing in it without having decided to stand in it. She stopped smoothing her gloves, became aware she had been smoothing them and stopped. "I have no talent for disappearing quietly," she said. "I thought I did. It appears I was mistaken." He stood. He did not close the distance between them. He was not that kind of man, and she had known this about him for weeks, that he did not crowd, that he waited, that his attention arrived before his presence did. He simply stood. "The house party," she said. "Is a house party," he said. "Lady Eugenia Cavendish is an admirable young woman who deserves a man who has not spent 6 weeks finding excuses to be in a conservatory at 7 in the morning." She almost smiled. She let it, this time. "Hartwell," she said. "Has his ledgers," he said. "I have mine." She thought about the door to Lincolnshire. The rectory with its north-facing windows. The field that flooded every February regardless of what anyone did about it. The compressed life, the careful cheerfulness of it, the room she had grown too large for. She thought about light arriving in pieces. She closed the door. Not dramatically. Not with any gesture the room could observe or record. She simply decided, standing in the broken morning light of a conservatory that was not technically open to her, with an unfinished letter in her pocket and a book she had retrieved under false pretenses under her arm, that she was not going anywhere. She had not become worthy of this. She had simply remembered that she already was. 3 days later she walked into Cavendish Hall on the arm of Lady Pemberton, a woman she had befriended at court who had opinions about everything and shared them freely and was, Louisa had found, tremendous company. They entered through the main door. Not a servant's entrance. The main door. The room was full of exactly the kind of people rooms like this were always full of, the well-born, the well-dressed, the precisely calibrated. Every compass in the room had already oriented toward its north. She did not look for him. She talked to Lady Pemberton about an exhibition at the Royal Academy. She accepted a glass of something she did not drink. She was, she found, remarkably calm, not the assembled calm she had practiced in mirrors, the chin-shoulders-hands architecture she retreated into under pressure, but something quieter than that. Something that did not require construction. She was aware of the room rearranging itself and did not look up. Miss Vane. She looked up. He had crossed the room. In front of everyone. In front of Hartwell, who was somewhere near the door with his folded hands and his ledger mind and his management of futures. In front of Lady Eugenia Cavendish, who was, from what Louisa could see, a perfectly lovely young woman who looked faintly relieved. In front of all of it. He stopped a correct distance away. His expression was the attentive one. The unperformed one. "I understand," he said, "that you have solved the music." She looked at him. The room was very quiet around them, or perhaps it wasn't, perhaps it was perfectly loud, but she was not attending to it. "A Schubert impromptu," she said. D. 899. The third one. Your housemate has been playing the melody in the right hand and constructing the accompaniment from the interval pattern alone.
She paused. She is remarkably good.
I will tell her, he said.
She will be mortified.
She will be pleased, Louisa said.
People who play by ear want to be heard.
Something shifted in his expression. Not the laugh this time, something that preceded the laugh, the moment before it arrived, the breath before the resolution.
Yes, he said. They do.
The room behind him continued its business. She was the last one to notice that it had reoriented, that every compass in the space had adjusted by some small collective degree, that Hartwell near the door had gone very still, that Lady Pemberton beside her had made a small sound of either approval or satisfaction or both.
She was too busy listening to Frederick laugh to attend to any of it. Not the public laugh. Not the performance. The real one.
The short, low, genuine one, gone almost before it arrived. She had been saving the music for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. It turned out this was it. The exterior of St. Paul's Cathedral, London, early November morning, 1903.
Fog sits low over Ludgate Hill, softening the dome into a grey mass against a colourless sky. Black-clad mourners in Edwardian dress move up the broad stone steps, the women in veiled hats, the men in frock coats and top hats.
A line of carriages stands along the street, horses patient in the cold. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The south entrance of St. Paul's Cathedral interior, morning.
A young woman in a dark wool coat and simple hat, Louisa, late 20s, composed bearing, good dress that is not fashionable, approaches the interior steps. The stone floor is worn and gleaming.
Tall candles burn in iron stands.
The nave stretches behind her, filled with standing mourners in black.
Her expression is careful, attentive.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The interior nave of St. Paul's Cathedral during a memorial service, 1903.
The flash powder of a press photographer ignites in a white burst near the south door, illuminating a young woman in dark wool mid-stumble, her gloved hands gripping the arm of a uniformed man. The nave is packed with mourners in black, their faces turned in the direction of the commotion.
Stone columns rise on either side.
Candlelight and flashlight mix. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Close scene inside St. Paul's nave, south transept area.
A young woman in a dark coat has just straightened herself after a stumble, gloved hands released from a man's arm.
She is looking up.
A tall man in a formal military uniform, Prince Frederick, 30s, composed, dark coat and decorations, is looking at her with an expression of precise, unperformed attention.
Between them, a dropped order of service card lies on the stone floor. The crowd around them pretends not to have seen.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Interior of St. Paul's Cathedral nave, close on Prince Frederick in profile, speaking quietly. He is in full military dress, medals on his chest, expression even and private. He is not performing for the crowd. Beside him, visible at the frame's edge, a young woman in dark wool is listening, her posture very correct, her face carefully neutral. Behind them the memorial congregation stands in ranked black. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
St. Paul's Cathedral interior, near the south door.
A press photographer in Edwardian dress, dark coat, cap, heavy equipment on a wooden tripod is reloading flash powder into his tray with the focused energy of a man who has captured something. Behind him, slightly out of focus, a uniformed figure has turned his head fractionally in the photographer's direction.
The exchange between them is barely visible, a glance, a stillness.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
St. Paul's Cathedral nave during a memorial service.
A young woman in dark wool stands in a pew, holding a folded order of service card in both gloved hands. She is folding and refolding it with unconscious precision, her eyes forward on the altar, her expression locked into careful blankness.
Around her the congregation is still and attentive. Candlelight falls along the rows of black-dressed figures.
She is not reading the card. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Wide view of St. Paul's Cathedral nave during the memorial service.
200 mourners in Edwardian black stand in ranked rows beneath the Great Dome.
Candles burn along the walls.
At the crossing, clergy officiate in white vestments against the stone. The light is gray and gold simultaneously, filtering from high windows. The scale of the space dwarfs every individual figure. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
St. Paul's Cathedral interior, a young woman in dark wool among the congregation.
She is looking straight ahead with the deliberate stillness of someone working hard at not looking to her left. Her gloved hands hold a folded card against her coat front.
Her jaw is set.
The pew end beside her shows carved oak. Behind her, candles and stone and ranked black figures. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The exterior of St. Paul's Cathedral, the great doors opening onto a November morning. Fog. Mourners in black emerging in a slow procession onto the top steps, the women's veils lifting slightly in the cold air. Carriages waiting on the street below.
A young woman in a dark coat follows at a careful distance behind an older woman in heavy mourning dress, eyes forward, expression composed. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A small rented room in a London household, early morning, 1903. A young woman in a plain house dress stands holding two folded newspapers, one in each hand. The room is spare: a single bed, a washstand, a window looking onto a brick wall. She is reading the papers with an expression of concentrated stillness. Morning light, gray and thin, comes through the window. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Close on a newspaper page, 1903, showing a photograph of a uniformed man in the nave of St. Paul's Cathedral.
He stands alone, in full military dress, looking toward the south door at something the camera cannot find.
The photograph is slightly blurred at the edges from the flash. The man's expression is composed and private.
Around the photograph, dense newsprint columns.
A woman's gloved hands hold the paper.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A sitting room in a London townhouse, Edwardian period, morning.
An elderly countess, Lady Ashmore, 70s, formidable, bright-eyed, sits in a wingback chair near the fire.
A spare, precise man, Lord Hartwell, 50s, dark coat, no expression to speak of, sits across from her in the indicated chair, hands folded in his lap. A younger woman, Louisa, stands to the side, very still, holding a small notebook.
The fire is low.
Beeswax and coal smoke. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Interior sitting room, close on Lord Hartwell seated in conversation. He is a compact, load-bearing sort of man, nothing extraneous about him.
His coat is excellent and undecorated.
His hands are folded. His expression is that of a man delivering information that requires no emotional engagement on his part. Across from him, barely visible at the frame's edge, an elderly woman's hand holds a teacup with perfect steadiness. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A sitting room in a London townhouse, morning. A young woman in grey, Louisa, stands slightly apart from two seated figures, her posture precisely correct, her face giving nothing away. She is looking at the spare, dark-coated man, Hartwell, who has just said something that requires no response. The room is warm, firelit, the furnishings good but not showy.
Heavy curtains. A clock on the mantelpiece.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
A London townhouse sitting room, close on Lady Ashmore after Hartwell has left.
She is an elderly woman of great composure, lifting her teacup with the unhurried ease of someone who has survived considerably worse than this. She is looking at the middle distance, not at Louisa.
Her expression is dry, assessing, faintly amused.
The fire burns behind her. A door has just been closed, off-frame. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A writing desk in a small room in a London household, morning. A young woman sits at the desk, drafting a letter. She writes and crosses out, writes and crosses out, the sheet before her covered in careful corrections. Around her, the desk is ordered: a small ink pot, a pen tray, a stack of correspondence. Her expression is the expression of someone who has been removing herself from things for a long time and is doing it again now.
Gray morning light from a window.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
A grand dining room set for a formal court luncheon, London, 1903.
Long tables with white damask cloths, crystal, silver, flowers. Edwardian figures in day dress and formal morning coats are finding their places.
Footmen in livery stand at intervals.
The room is high-ceilinged, gaslights burning, the light white and even. A young woman in grey Louisa is being shown to a chair at the far end of the table by a footman who clearly knows her name. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Court luncheon, London, 1903. The room has oriented.
A group of 6 well-dressed figures has just entered from the far door, and the unconscious adjustment is visible in every person present, shoulders turned, eyes moved, without a single deliberate choice being made. At the center of the group, a tall man in formal morning dress, Frederick, moves through the room with the ease of someone who has never had to ask for attention. The room gives it without being asked. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A formal luncheon table, Edwardian, London.
A young woman in grey Louisa is in conversation with an elderly baronet to her right. She is engaged, precise, genuinely attentive. The baronet is pleased.
The table around them is full of Edwardian figures in conversation. Somewhere to her left, off-frame, a presence she is deliberately not looking at.
The tablecloth has a repeating diamond pattern.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A formal luncheon table, close on a young woman in grey in the middle of looking away from something. Her eyes have just dropped from a point slightly to her left and are now fixed on the tablecloth. Her expression is controlled and giving nothing. Her right hand rests beside her plate with deliberate stillness.
The tablecloth's diamond pattern is clearly visible near her hand.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Court luncheon table, Edwardian London.
A tall man in morning dress, Frederick, is in profile, speaking to a woman on his left. His attention is correctly placed. But the angle of his head is fractionally wrong for the direction of his conversation, turned by some small degree toward the other end of the table. His expression is private, giving nothing. The table around him is full of Edwardian figures. Candlelight and gaslight. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A formal luncheon table, Edwardian, the end of the meal.
Most guests are rising.
A young woman in grey Louisa is gathering a small bag and spectacles from near the floor. She is 2 steps behind an older woman who is already moving toward the door. Behind Louisa, a male figure in morning dress is passing behind her chair, moving, not stopping, but setting something down on the tablecloth beside her plate with deliberate precision. She has not turned. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Close on a formal luncheon table, most guests gone. A small rectangular card and order of service from a cathedral memorial sits on the white damask tablecloth beside an abandoned water glass. The card is folded into quarters with visible crease marks. Around it, the empty table setting, crystal, silver, the remains of a meal. A woman's grey-gloved hand has stopped a few inches from the card and is not touching it. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
A formal luncheon room, nearly empty, London, 1903.
A young woman in grey stands at the far end of a long table, looking down at something on the tablecloth. The room is emptying behind her, figures in Edwardian dress moving toward the far door. She is motionless, alone at her end of the table, the repeating diamond pattern of the cloth visible around her. Her expression is the expression of someone who has just stopped believing something she told herself. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
A glass-walled conservatory at a London royal residence, early morning, 1903.
The space is warm and humid, filled with forced narcissus and winter greenery in terracotta pots. The light through the east-facing glass panes is fractured and pale, arriving in pieces rather than sheets, the leaded frames dividing it into sections across the tiled floor. A single chair near the back wall catches the best of it.
Outside, the garden is bare and wintry. The conservatory is empty.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory at Marlborough House, early morning. A young woman, Louisa, sits in a chair near the east-facing glass, a book open on her knee.
She is reading with the focused attention of someone who has claimed this space and is determined to use it correctly. The light comes through the leaded panes in pale sections across her hands and the page.
Forced narcissus in a nearby pot.
The door behind her is closed.
She is entirely alone and entirely calm.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory door opening, early morning. A tall man in a dark coat, Frederick, no uniform, dressed as if without assistance, enters. He carries a book, dog-eared at the spine. He is not surprised by what he finds.
His expression is the attentive one, unperformed, precise.
At the far end of the conservatory, barely visible, a young woman has looked up from her own book. Between them, the humid green-smelling air, the narcissus, the broken light. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, early morning. Two figures at opposite ends of a small table, a young woman in grey, Louisa, with an open book, a tall man in a dark coat, Frederick, with his own.
Neither is reading.
The east-facing light comes through the glass in sections.
A cup of cold tea sits near Louisa's elbow.
The silence between them is not uncomfortable, it is the silence of two people who have decided to be in the same room and are negotiating the terms. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory, morning.
Close on Frederick's face and profile, turned toward the east-facing glass panes. He is watching the light, fractured, pale, arriving through the leaded frames in sections. His expression is open in a way his public face is not performing, not managing, simply looking at a thing he finds worth looking at. The light falls across his jaw and the shoulder of his dark coat. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory, morning.
Close on Louisa's face, turned slightly away from the table, as she speaks. She is describing something, the quality of light, the word for it. Her expression has the particular quality of someone who has said something more honest than they intended and is noticing this. The fractured morning light from the glass panes falls across her features. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory, morning.
Frederick is looking directly at Louisa, the attentive, measuring look, the one that has no performance in it. She is looking at her book. He has just heard something that required adjustment, a word, a phrase, and his expression holds the quality of a man taking something in without yet knowing where to put it.
Damp green smell. Narcissus. Broken light.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory, morning.
Louisa sits at the table with her book closed on her knee, not reading.
She is listening.
Somewhere above her, imperfectly audible through the glass and the ceiling, a piano is playing a phrase, practiced, paused, tried again. Her expression is the expression of someone who almost knows a piece of music and is trying to locate it.
Fractured light.
The smell of forced flowers. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory, morning. A moment of stillness.
Frederick has just laughed, the real laugh, the short, low, surprised one, not the public version, and it is already nearly gone. His expression retains the trace of it, the openness before the composure resettles.
Louisa is looking at her book. She is not looking at him.
She is very carefully not looking at him. Broken morning light through east-facing glass. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning, near the door.
Louisa is standing, book in hand, moving to leave. Frederick is still seated at the table.
He has begun to rise and been stopped by a small motion of her hand, a brief, minimal gesture that meant no ceremony, please.
He has settled. She is at the door.
On the bench behind him, her book is sitting where she has left it.
She has not yet noticed.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
The conservatory, morning.
Close on the bench, a book cloth-bound, a history, sits on the wooden slats beside a cold teacup.
It has been left behind.
The door to the conservatory is visible at the far end of the frame, recently closed. The east-facing light falls in its sections across the empty bench. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A corridor in a London royal residence, morning.
A young woman, Louisa, walks at a deliberate pace back toward the main house. She is carrying nothing.
Her hands are at her sides. Her expression is the expression of someone who has identified a problem and found no corrective action available. The corridor is stone-floored, lit by a high window.
She is entirely alone.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A writing room in a London household, morning. A young woman sits at a desk reading a letter on plain paper, her father's handwriting, dense and careful. Her face holds the compression of someone reading careful cheerfulness written by someone who has learned to live in a smaller space. Around her, the room is ordered and impersonal. A cold cup of tea near her elbow.
Gray light from the window.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
A London household corridor, morning, 1903.
Lord Hartwell's spare, precise, dark coat approaches along a carpeted hallway toward a closed door. His expression is the expression of a man who has arranged things to his satisfaction and is about to deliver the information. A footman holds the door. The corridor is lit by gaslights. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A small sitting room in a London household, mid-morning. Lord Hartwell sits in a chair, declined tea, hands folded.
He is speaking.
Across from him, a young woman, Louisa, sits with the posture of someone who has been expecting this and is receiving it without any visible change of expression.
The room is quiet.
Outside, November presses against the windows in gray increments. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Close on Lord Hartwell's hands, folded in his lap, in a small sitting room. The hands are still, not relaxed, still, the way a well-maintained machine is still when not in operation.
The coat sleeves are good dark wool.
In the background, slightly out of focus, a young woman's gray-gloved hands rest on the arms of her chair. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A small sitting room in a London household after Hartwell has left.
Louisa sits alone at her desk.
The door is closed.
The room is very quiet. November light at the window. She is not moving. Her hands are flat on the desk surface. She has been sitting like this for some time.
The expression on her face is the expression of someone who has just understood something they had been avoiding understanding. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A writing desk in a London household room. A young woman, Louisa, holds a pen over a sheet of writing paper.
She has written 2 lines and stopped.
She is reading what she has written. Her expression is that of someone who has realized the letter was not a decision but documentation of a decision already made. The pen is still raised. The 2 lines are visible on the page but not legible. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A window in a London household room, mid-morning.
A young woman stands looking down into a gray courtyard below.
The cobblestones are wet from recent rain. A single groom crosses the courtyard with his collar turned up.
The scene is ordinary, an ordinary Tuesday, an ordinary November. The woman's reflection is faintly visible in the glass. Her expression is the expression of someone measuring something.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A corridor in a London royal residence, very early morning, the conservatory door visible at the end. A young woman, Louisa, approaches it with the deliberate purpose of someone who has convinced herself she is here for a practical reason.
She is carrying nothing.
The corridor is quiet.
Gray morning light from a high window.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, early morning.
Louisa has just opened the door and stopped. Inside, on the bench near the east-facing glass, Frederick sits. He is in his coat. Her book, The Flemish Wool Trade, is on the table beside him, where she left it, unopened. He has no book of his own. He is looking at the glass. He has been here for some time. The morning light comes through in pieces. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Frederick on the bench, in profile, looking toward the east-facing panes. He is wearing his coat. He has been sitting here long enough that his stillness has settled into the room. It is not the stillness of arrival but the stillness of having been present for a while. The light through the glass falls in sections. A book sits on the table beside him. He is not reading it. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Louisa has crossed to the bench and picked up her book. She is standing, not sitting, book under one arm. Her coat pocket, the left one, seems to have some weight in it. She is aware of it with her whole left side. She is looking up at the glass roof. Frederick sits 2 feet away on the bench, also looking up. Between them, the humid air, the narcissus, the broken light. Neither is speaking. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Close on the glass roof of the conservatory, morning, looking up from below. The leaded panes are counted from this angle, 31 of them, their geometric pattern visible against the pale November sky outside. Fractured light falls through them in sections. The edges of the frame show the tops of forced narcissus, the humid interior warmth. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. 2 figures, Louisa standing, book under her arm, Frederick seated on the bench, both looking up at the glass roof. They are not speaking. The house around them is beginning its day, faint sounds from other rooms, footsteps somewhere above. November outside, gray and ordinary. The space between them is not uncomfortable. Neither is moving. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Louisa is moving toward the door, having stayed longer than she intended. Frederick has not moved from the bench. He watches her go with the attentive, unperformed expression. She is not looking back. The door handle is visible ahead of her. The morning sounds of the house are louder now. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. A conservatory in a London royal residence, early morning, the day before the Cavendish house party. Louisa stands at the east-facing glass panes, looking out, not sitting. She has not brought her book. The morning light comes through in its usual fractured sections. Behind her, Frederick is on the bench, his own book closed on his knee. He has just said something and she has turned from the glass. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning, close on Louisa's expression as she turns from the glass panes. She has just heard a word, coward, and is deciding how to receive it. Her expression is controlled but not locked, something is working behind it. The fractured light from the panes falls across her face. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Frederick on the bench, looking at Louisa directly. He is in his dark coat. His book is closed and set aside on the table. His expression is the new one, not the attentive assessing quality, but the quieter, more direct expression of a man who has calculated the cost of something and is paying it. He is very still. The light comes through the glass in pieces. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Louisa is looking at the east-facing glass panes rather than at Frederick, who is 2 feet away on the bench. She is listening to something, the piano upstairs, the familiar unresolved phrase. Her expression has the quality of someone who has been waiting for the right moment to say something and is about to discover whether this is it. The fractured light falls across her coat sleeve. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. A moment of total stillness.
Louisa has said something, the music has been found, she looked it up 3 weeks ago, she was saving it, and Frederick has gone entirely still on the bench. His expression holds the quality of a man who has just received a piece of information with two meanings and is understanding both simultaneously. The piano upstairs plays its phrase. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Above the conservatory, in a corridor 2 floors up, barely audible, a housemaid has found the left-hand accompaniment. The piano phrase plays through completely for the first time, the familiar right-hand melody, and, now the new left-hand resolution, arrived at by ear, fitting with the simple satisfaction of a thing that was always true. In the conservatory below, Louisa has stopped smoothing her gloves. She is standing in the fractured light. Frederick is standing. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Frederick has stood from the bench. He has not closed the distance, he is not that kind of man. He simply stands. Louisa is 2 feet away, also standing, also not closing the distance. Between them, the table, the cold teacup, the book she came to retrieve. The light through the glass falls in its sections. The piano above has found its resolution. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Close on Louisa's hands, grey wool gloves, as she stops smoothing them. They have stilled. She has become aware of what she was doing and has stopped. Her arms are at her sides. This is a small thing. It is not a small thing. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The conservatory, morning. Louisa and Frederick standing a correct distance apart, neither having moved toward the other. She is almost smiling, not the managed almost smile she catches before it becomes public, but the real one, allowed through. He is watching her with the attentive expression and something that precedes the laugh, the moment before it, the breath before the resolution. The broken light falls across both of them. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. The entrance hall of Cavendish Hall, a country house in Edwardian England, late afternoon. A well-appointed entrance, marble floors, a staircase, hunting portraits, the smell of beeswax and hothouse chrysanthemums. Guests in Edwardian country house dress are arriving, footmen taking coats. A young woman, Louisa, enters through the main front door on the arm of an older woman, Lady Pemberton, confident, well-dressed, opinionated. Louisa has come through the main door. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Cavendish Hall drawing room, late afternoon. A large country house drawing room filled with Edwardian figures in formal day dress, the well-born, the well-connected, the precisely calibrated. Fires burn in 2 marble grates. Crystal and silver catch the gaslight. The room is oriented. Near the far end, a tall figure in formal morning dress, Frederick, is visible, his back partly turned, in conversation with others. Louisa is near the entrance, arm in arm with Lady Pemberton, not looking toward him. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Cavendish Hall drawing room. Louisa and Lady Pemberton in conversation near the room's entrance. Lady Pemberton is animated, she has opinions and is sharing them freely. Louisa is listening with genuine attention, a glass she is not drinking from held in one hand. Her posture is the natural one, not assembled, not constructed, simply present. She is not scanning the room. She is, for the first time in this story, simply in it. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Cavendish Hall drawing room, a moment of stillness. The room has reoriented again, that collective, unconscious adjustment, but Louisa has not looked up. She is aware of it with the peripheral intelligence she applies to all rooms, but she is not attending to it. The room is full of Edwardian figures. Near the door at the far side, Lord Hartwell stands with folded hands. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Cavendish Hall drawing room, close. Frederick has crossed the room. He stands before Louisa at a correct, formal distance. Around them, the room is fully visible, the watching figures, the oriented compasses, Hartwell near the door, Lady Eugenia Cavendish at the far end looking, from what can be seen, faintly relieved.
Frederick's expression is the attentive one. The unperformed one. He is in front of everyone.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Cavendish Hall drawing room, close on Louisa as she looks up at Frederick.
She has just heard her name.
Her expression is the calm one, the real calm, not the assembled version.
She is entirely present. The glass in her hand is still. Around them the room watches. She does not look at the room.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England. Cavendish Hall drawing room, close on the exchange between Frederick and Louisa.
He has said something about the music.
She is answering precisely, with the detail of someone who looked something up 3 weeks ago and has been carrying the answer since. Her voice is level. Her expression holds the trace of something that is not quite a smile but occupies the same space. He is listening with the full, precise quality of his attention. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Cavendish Hall drawing room, wide shot. The room has completed its reorientation.
Every figure present has adjusted by that small, collective, unconscious degree toward a point near the center of the room where two people are talking about a piece of music. Lord Hartwell near the door has gone very still. Lady Pemberton, close by, has made a small sound. The fires burn in both grates.
Crystal catches the gaslight.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Cavendish Hall drawing room, close. Frederick laughs. Not the public laugh, the real one.
Short, low, genuine, already almost gone.
Louisa is watching him with an expression of complete attention, not managed, not assembled. She is listening.
The room around them continues its Edwardian business conversation, crystal, firelight, but she is not attending to any of it.
She is busy with this.
Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.
Cavendish Hall drawing room, the moment after.
Louisa and Frederick, a correct distance apart, in a room that has entirely rearranged itself around them without either of them having done anything as dramatic as the room suggests.
The fires burn. The gaslight catches the crystal. The Edwardian figures have found their new orientations. She is the last to have noticed. She is looking at him. He is looking at her.
The music, somewhere in the house, has found its resolution. Realistic photograph style, cinematic lighting, Victorian England.